Welcome back to GAA Fan TV. My name is Aaron. Delighted to be joined here by Seamus Brady of the Play on GAA podcast. It's the 2023 Dublin season preview. We're going to be looking at the footballers and hurlers in great detail ahead of the 2023 intercounty season. Just a reminder, we're brought to you by Declan Kirby GAA Star, the best children's GAA book out there on the market at the minute. You can find it on Amazon, Easons, all good bookshops. So make sure to check it out when you get a chance. Seamus, how is life with yourself? You're all excited and ready for another, what is usually an eventful season following Dublin, whether it's good or bad, but you're all set and ready for a new season?
Yeah, good, Aaron. Thanks for having me on again. Yeah, I think this season is going to be pretty interesting supporting Dublin now. Obviously, you know, with the hurlers, we're hearing a lot of rumours about who's coming, who's going. I think it's going to be a real year of transition. I think we're going to see a lot of new lads in the team, obviously with Micheál Donoghue coming in there. And then with the footballers, last year was such a weird one because the start of the season was all this chaos, you know, and that's the, you know, the AFC obviously back in the championship of that epic against Kerry in the semi-final, and we go down to that last minute free. And a lot of people, including myself, looked at that and said, look, we lost to Kerry by a point. We were without Con O'Callaghan, we were without Jack McCaffrey, and we were without Paul Mannion. I think those three players get into any team in the country. So, look, I think it's going to be a really interesting season to see how Desi manages having a full Dublin squad this season. Will he be able to bring the All-Ireland back to the capital? We'll see. And for the hurlers, yeah, another very, very interesting season coming.
Absolutely, yeah. Like, and I suppose like we'll get into obviously Paul Mannion and Jack McCaffrey obviously coming back into the team, and maybe how Dublin might sort of set up next season. But looking back at last year, first of all, I mean, obviously it was as you said there, like it was a very strange year following Dublin. I think after being beaten by Mayo in the 2021 All-Ireland semi-finals, I think it goes without saying you could clearly see that there was a bit of regression within the Dublin team. You know, there were maybe a few lads getting on a bit. There maybe was a bit of a transition period coming, but at the same time, I don't think anyone quite expected Dublin to be as poor as they were in the league. I mean, like, let's not forget, they got absolutely wiped by Armagh. Like that scoreline was probably flattered Dublin more than anything else. Kerry and Mayo, there was absolutely no challenge there. And then obviously losing to Kildare for the first time since 2000, I think it was, in a competitive intercounty game. So, I mean, it was a really, really slow start out the gates.
Yeah, no, it was. And I think kind of the worst thing about the Kildare one was going into the game, there was this kind of almost expectation that Dublin were going to lose. Like, it was like once we lost to Mayo, and once we lost to Kerry, and once we lost to Armagh, there was then this sense of, well, who shouldn't be looking at trying to beat Dublin? And once you realised that Kildare had us in Newbridge, there was a real expectation that Kildare were going to do it. And they were brilliant on the day, obviously, Jimmy Hyland getting the goal, and they were full value for that victory. And then, obviously, to cap it off, Dublin all of a sudden turn up against Tyrone. Fantastic performance that day. All of a sudden they turned on. Then they beat Donegal as well. Now we end up in a position where we nearly stayed up. After all that, you know, we nearly stayed up. I think, what was it? We managed to get 6 points and still not stay in Division 1. It was a bit of a weird one. We went down on the last day against Monaghan. Jack McCarron put in a performance, like as good a performance as I've seen in a clutch game. He was outstanding that day. And yeah, obviously kicking the decisive point to send us down to Division 2. This is the first time since 2007, I believe, that Dublin are down in Division 2. So it's been a long, long time that Dublin have been in Division 1. And no Leinster county in Division 1 is pretty shocking for the province. But yeah, look, realistically, I'd be pretty confident saying that we'll win Division 2. We'll, you know, Derry are there. They're going to be a real challenge. And obviously there are some other strong sides in there, the likes of Limerick and Louth, even that got promoted. They're coming with serious momentum. But Dublin are the obvious contenders to win Division 2. I mean, like, recency bias can be strong, but this is still a side with the spine of a team that won 6 All-Irelands in a row. And with Mannion, McCaffrey and O'Callaghan back to full fitness, back to full form, I think Dublin are going straight back up to Division 1, which should set us up for an interesting championship.
Yeah, like, I mean, and looking at that league campaign, like, it was from what I've seen anyway, the worst National Football League season on record for Dublin, with 2 wins, 5 defeats. Like even when they got relegated from, I think back in 2008, I think it was, as you said, going into 2007, like I think like they were reformatting the league, so Dublin actually finished like 4th bottom or 3rd bottom and still ended up getting relegated. So sort of an unusual relegation in more ways than one. But in terms of the championship season, then obviously win the Leinster, like very, very comfortable. Like Con O'Callaghan obviously comes back, and it's mad, isn't it? Like Dublin just look a completely different team when he's in the side.
Oh, he's an absolute crucial player, because when he came back against Kildare, particularly his performance against Kildare, he was just the piece that the attack moved around. All of a sudden, Dublin weren't so reliant on Dean Rock, they weren't so reliant on Cormac Costello, and they could do that with Con taking the main attention. And Con is a brilliant, brilliant focal point of that attack, and he needs to be starting every game for Dublin, because I do believe that, look, I think if we had Con, if we had Mannion, if we had McCaffrey, I do think we would have got over the line against Kerry that day. We only lost by a point, and it was a wonder point as well. It was a Sean O'Shea free from literally basically his own half of the field. Like, it was an outrageous kick. And I think, obviously, you know, it's impossible to tell now. And obviously, Kerry did draw with Dublin when they did have Mannion, McCaffrey and Con O'Callaghan in the 2019 final. And that Kerry team was a very, very young side, not as good as they are now. So maybe Kerry still would have won. But you can't argue that with those 3 in the side, Dublin are a better team. And yeah, look, realistically, Con he's one of the Jenga pieces. If you take him out, the attack is not the same. It really isn't. And Dublin don't have the same strength and depth that they used to have. I mean, you remember their bench around 2016, 2017, 2018. It was ridiculous. Now we need these 3 or 4 players. We need Con, we need Brian Fenton, we need James McCarthy to be at our best. And yeah, so Con, getting him back to full fitness, keeping him at full fitness is absolutely crucial for 2023.
Yeah, because I think the injury problems did probably get lost in translation, probably in some ways. Like Con O'Callaghan was missing for the entirety of the league. Obviously comes back in the Leinster Championship, but then is missing for the All-Ireland semi-finals. Like Owen Merchant had his injury problems. I think he's crucial to Dublin. James McCarthy's had injury problems. He's been in and out. You know, like, so there's been plenty of injury problems in there for Dublin, and maybe a lot of people focusing on the negatives, on the defeats. But actually, when you look at the big picture with those injuries, you know, like if you took David Clifford out of Kerry, you know, you see what happened to Mayo with some of their injuries last year. So you see what happens when you take some big players out of these big counties.
Oh, without doubt. I mean, in every county, there's the 2 or 3 irreplaceables. And even when Dublin were winning those All-Irelands, a lot of people, you know, obviously now, having moved on and having been a few years after Dublin's All-Ireland victories, a lot of people forget Dublin didn't really suffer that much with injuries during that All-Ireland run. Brian Fenton was never injured. Kieran Kilkenny was hardly ever injured. On top of that, Mannion was hardly ever injured. James McCarthy was hardly ever injured. The only high-profile injury I can remember was when Stephen Cluxton got a knock off the Longford fella, James McGivney, when McGivney jumped into him when Cluxton was in the air, and Comerford played, I think it was 2 games or something in the championship, and then Cluxton came back. Dublin had a really, really lucky period of no injuries, which meant that they could go into every All-Ireland final pretty much with a full team. The only player that really kind of wasn't there sometimes when he definitely would have started was Dave McConnelly, and that was nothing to do with injuries. So, yeah, Dublin, maybe the period of not having injuries, it's caught up to them now and it's over, and now we're getting, you know, 50 injuries at once. But I think still, if we can keep these lads out of the treatment room and keep them fit and keep them fresh, I think we're right up there for the All-Ireland.
Yeah, I think so as well. Like, I think when you do factor those lads coming in, like, I think it's fair to say, even without them lads, they're not a million miles away. Like, as we were saying there, the match against Kerry, like, it was extremely close. And obviously when Cormac Costello gets that goal, Kerry get a little bit shaky after that. I remember thinking, and, you know, watching it live and everything else, and thinking, like, Kerry are a little bit rattled here. Like, Dublin have them sort of on the ropes, and obviously, as you said, Sean O'Shea scores that wonder point, and Kerry get the win in the end. But, you know, it's one of those games and one of those reminders as well that we're not that far away maybe as what we thought. Like, I remember thinking before the Kerry game, like, oh, Kerry will probably wipe the floor with Dublin, like probably win 7 or 8 points, you know, and there was all talks maybe about Desi stepping down, but it felt like even though Dublin lost that game, there were still plenty of positives to take, which is weird considering we just got beat by Kerry in an All-Ireland semi-final. But when you consider how good this Kerry team are and considering the injuries that we had, there's definitely a lot to be positive for.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, going into that game, deep down, I did think Kerry would win. And like, I was more kind of hoping that we could pull something out of the bag, and we nearly did. Yeah, I remember with the penalty save, particularly from Sean O'Shea, when Evan Comerford saved it and Dublin were staying in the game. I remember thinking, yeah, like we still have a really good team out there. Like, I don't know why everyone's forgotten just how good these lads are. And when we put, you know, the burners on Kerry in the second half with the Costello goal and Kieran Kilkenny's point and everything, it was really like, here, we can do this. Like, that being said, Kerry will be better next year, I think, because now Kerry they've got one. They've got an All-Ireland, and you know, the pressure that is put on Kerry teams is immense. I think we know that, you know, they expect an All-Ireland, and if they don't win the All-Ireland, that season is a failure. And now that pressure, that weight of expectation that was on David Clifford, that was on Sean O'Shea, that was on Gavin White, that was on these lads, it's gone now. Now they have the ability to express themselves, play freely. They don't have that pressure that you have to get an All-Ireland. We have to get an All-Ireland out of this crop. And, you know, you know yourself, it plays mentally. When you get that close and you haven't got over the line before, you can get a bit nervous. You can get a bit jittery. And Kerry were getting jittery against Galway as well in the final. There was a period where, like, Galway looked like they might actually, you know, beat Kerry. You know, in the first half when Shane Walsh was kicking everything over the bar, there was a period where you're thinking, here, Kerry aren't turning up. And if it wasn't for David Clifford in that first half especially, like, they would have been in serious trouble at halftime. So now that they've got over the line and now that they have an All-Ireland in their back pocket, I think mentally they'll be more relaxed and mentally they'll be stronger, because now they know, okay, we've got one. And that pressure of, you know, having never won All-Ireland is already gone. So now they can kind of just give it a lash this year without, you know, being branded as failures if they don't take it home.
Yeah. Like, there definitely were some vulnerabilities with Kerry last year. Like, I think they were beatable very much in the All-Ireland final. I think a bit more quality from Galway in the sort of final few moments, and it may have seen them get over the line. Like, it was a really, really close game. So I think last year you seen there were vulnerabilities in there with Kerry, and, you know, if Dublin can hopefully improve this year, maybe they'll be able to capitalize on that if some of those vulnerabilities are still there from a Kingdom perspective. But obviously Desi Farrell staying on as Dublin manager. I mean, there were plenty of rumours obviously following on from that Kerry defeat. I think Declan Darcy was, I think, on most people's lips as the man who was going to replace him. It was going all over Twitter. There was media articles reporting on it, and it looked almost certain really that Desi was going to be leaving as Dublin manager. But in the end, he stays on. What were your thoughts on Desi staying on?
I have to say, if you'd asked me this question this time last year, I think I would have been a little bit more concerned. But this time I'm more kind of optimistic about it, because, like, spin the clock back to this time last year, Dublin had, you know, gone out in the semi-final against Mayo, and remember there'd been a whole buzz of discontent around the Dublin team all throughout the championship in 2021. We'd won the Leinster Championship, but every game there was this feeling of, what is going on here? Like, I'd never seen a county win a provincial championship in weirder circumstances. It was like we beat Meath, but I remember Meath getting that goal and they came within 5 points of us, and it was I think it was only, there was some mad stat that like Wexford in the first game and Meath in the second game were the only sides out of a certain group to come within 10 points of Dublin since like 2015 or something. There's something mad like that. And there was a real sense all throughout the season that Dublin are collapsing, you know, from within. And then that semi-final against Mayo, that last half was a collapse. Mayo, particularly in extra time, when Mayo got those 3 points in about 2 minutes, Ryan O'Donoghue hit one of the easiest points he's ever hit in his life. That was like Dublin scored 1 point in the entire extra time. They didn't score in the second half of extra time. And then to cap it off in the last minute, you know, legends of this Dublin team lose their head. You know, there's scuffles all over the place with the Mayo players. It just looked like it was such an unhappy camp. And I remember, like, look, Mannion's not playing anymore. McCaffrey's not playing anymore. There's rumours that other lads are going to leave. And I was thinking, if this is all true, that the camp is so unhappy that our best players are leaving, and we have to look at the setup there. We have to look at the structure. And I would have said at the time to replace Dessie Farrell with Declan Darcy. I would have said that at the time. Now I'd be saying, yeah, keep Dessie Farrell. And it's mad what a difference a year can make. Now that Mannion is coming back, now that McCaffrey is coming back, it's clear that they don't have a personal issue with Dessie Farrell. It's clear that now he can actually get the best players on the pitch. And there does seem to be a bit of a better atmosphere about the Dublin team. The way that the year finished up, the way that, look, we put in a good show against Kerry in that semi-final. I know we lost, but we did ourselves proud, and it was a proud defeat. But next year, the All-Ireland will be, you know, the only goal for Dublin. Make no mistake about that, because I think the reason that Mannion left and the reason McCaffrey left was simply down to the fact that Dublin, honestly, were winning All-Irelands too easy. Like the 2020 All-Ireland, let's be real, like that whole thing of there's no such thing as an easy All-Ireland. That 2020 All-Ireland that Dublin won was as close to an easy All-Ireland as I've ever seen us win. Like the only tough game that Dublin had in that championship was the All-Ireland final against Mayo. And Dublin, I believe Dublin didn't beat a single team that was in Division 1. I think Mayo had got relegated from Division 1 into Division 2. Yeah. So technically, Dublin won the All-Ireland without beating a team that played next year's league in Division 1, which is crazy when you put it like that. So I think with McCaffrey, I think they just walked after that because they were saying, look, you know, we've been there, done that. But now it's a real challenge. You're coming back here now. You used to be kings, but now in your absence, a new team has risen up and they are damn good. They have Clifford, they have Sean O'Shea. And the stat that I always point out is Dublin's success came off the back of one minor All-Ireland title win. One. Kerry won 5 in a row. They're the only team to do that. So I'm thinking if Dublin got that success off the back of one minor All-Ireland winning side, what the hell can Kerry do with 5 in a row? So that's what I'm saying. It's a real challenge now for Mannion and McCaffrey to come back in and to prove that Dublin are the best team.
Yeah, like it's an interesting point you make as well, because I've always kind of felt similar to a certain extent in terms of Dublin's downfall. I mean, like they literally achieved everything there was to achieve. I mean, they literally completed Gaelic football. Like until another team does a 6 in a row or beats the 6th round, does a 7 in a row, you know, it's always going to be remembered as the greatest Gaelic football team of all time. And sure, you can look at, you know, there's always external factors people point to, like resources or playing every game in Croke Park and everything else, but you can't deny it is the greatest team of all time in Gaelic football, in my opinion. Like better than the Kerry team in the 70s and better than any other team in the history of the sport, especially at senior level anyway.
The only caveat I'd have to that is, sorry to go across you, the only caveat I'd have to that is if you're talking in an individual team, there's an argument there for Kerry's team, because Kerry's team probably was exactly the same in the first All-Ireland final out of the 4 in a row as it was in the 4th. If you look at Dublin's team in the 2015 final as the 2019, 2020 final, it's completely different. Like key players in 2015 were Bernard Brogan, Paul Flynn.
Alan Brogan as well was playing.
Yeah, Alan Brogan was still kicking around. He came off the bench in that final in 2015. But players like Paddy Andrews and stuff were key to that team. 2019, 2020, they weren't starting in those All-Ireland finals. Players like Brian Howard, Con O'Callaghan were the key players then. So that's the only little window where it'd be like, okay, Kerry's key players in the 1978 All-Ireland final were the same players that were crucial in the 1981 final where they completed the 4 in a row. So I think that's the only window, but I would still say that Dublin are the better, because obviously they won the 6 and Kerry won 4.
Yeah, like it's one of them things. It's different eras, different timelines. Like obviously we clearly weren't around in the 70s to actually see those Kerry teams play like sort of week in, week out. I'm sure there'll be some Kerry fans who might be watching this who may disagree and say that Kerry were the greatest team to do it. But as I was saying there, like I mean, when you do win a 6 in a row, like there is nothing left to achieve. And I think sometimes you see this, and I mean Tyson Fury's a good example where he achieved everything there was to achieve in boxing, and you know, obviously he made a bit of a comeback in the end, but you know, like he steps away because there's literally nothing else to do. You look at someone like Conor McGregor as well, who sort of achieved everything nearly there was to achieve in MMA, and he steps away, so doesn't really have the motivation. You look at Dublin, and you know, like they achieved everything there was to achieve, so inevitably there's going to be a drop off. There's going to be players who will make themselves unavailable, who will retire maybe prematurely, because realistically, like there probably was nothing really left to achieve, you know?
Yeah, and I think that comes back to the old saying, like it's a coach's worst nightmare if the student achieves it all, because there's nothing left to do. Like you've done it all. You are the best team in Gaelic football, and on top of that, what often gets forgotten about when you're talking about, you know, these lads is they're young lads, like they're in their 20s. You know, like they want to go traveling, they want to see the world, they want to go away with their friends, they want to, you know, sometimes not have the pressure, let's be real, that comes with being an inter-county player. And like once they won those 6 All-Irelands, it definitely was like, well, why would I keep doing this when I can go, you know, to the States, when I can go to Australia, when I can go to New Zealand, when I can go traveling around the world, when I can spend time with my friends that I would have spent playing with Dublin. And I think with Mannion, the fact that he wasn't starting in 2020 was a big, big reason as to why he stepped. Because I think it was like, well, if I'm not going to start even with all the work that I'm putting in, why would I bother? You know, he knew deep down, I am one of the best forwards in the country. And he showed that with Kilmacud Crokes when he was gone. He was like probably the best player in the club championship last year, up until obviously getting injured and not being there for the final, which I think if he was there, I think Crokes would have beaten Kilcoo that day. I think because when Kilcoo were coming back, Mannion would have been the leader for Crokes to turn the game around. And obviously Crokes only lost by that last minute goal. So I think he showed, and I think he proved his point. But yeah, now that they're back, they have a real challenge on their hands. And it's interesting, you mentioned obviously like Tyson Fury there. Kerry almost like the Deontay Wilder here, that like once you left, a new champion has come to the fore, a new king is there now, and you have to come back and kind of prove that you can take that crown back and you are the best. And I think that is what is going with Mannion and McCaffrey now, because I have to say, look, Mannion's comeback, I have to say, like I did kind of think Mannion would come back eventually, but Jack McCaffrey, I was very surprised by that one. I didn't see him coming back next year, especially not next year. I thought he'd be, you know, potentially never play for Dublin again, if I have to be honest.
Yeah, well, it was surprising, all right, because like McCaffrey even said in an interview on Off the Ball, like, you know, he was very vocal in saying that he didn't want to come back to Dublin. Like he was sort of really, really vocal in saying that. And, you know, like, I mean, obviously Paul Mannion, as you said there in 2020, like he wasn't starting. So clearly there probably was some sort of disruption between himself and Dessie Farrell. I think that goes probably without saying. So it's interesting that both of them have come back. And in particular, Jack McCaffrey. I mean, McCaffrey hasn't even, like, I think people forget this, he hasn't even played too many championship games for Clontarf either, for the senior team. Like he hasn't really been involved in Gaelic football too often. Now he was playing in the Dave Hickey Cup recently with Dublin North, but which is good to see. You know, it's good to see him sort of lining out there, getting game time, because that's what he's going to need. But like Mannion has had injury problems, McCaffrey has had injury problems. So like I do think Division 2 will be crucial to sort of just slowly embed them back into the team. And Con O'Callaghan as well. I mean, he's had injury problems for the past year. So like it's not as easy just throwing them all together. Like it probably is going to take a bit of time to sort of gel them back in and make sure they're ready for the championship.
Yeah, no, this is going to be where Dessie Farrell earns his money. Like this is going to be where we see how good a coach he is, because the fans will look at it and say, well, we've got Mannion back, we've got McCaffrey back. Not quite. Yes, they are down to play, but we all know Paul Mannion's injury record. I mean, I wouldn't put my life that he'll be playing in the championship for Dublin, because, you know, he has a tendency to get injured a lot. McCaffrey as well, yeah, he could be back, but maybe he won't be the same player. Dublin have to breed him back in. I mean, the example that I can give is when Rory O'Carroll came back, 2019. Rory O'Carroll plays in that Super 8s against Tyrone. And everyone was saying, oh, Rory O'Carroll's back. Dublin's full-back problems are sorted because we got Rory O'Carroll back. And he played against Tyrone in that game, and he did look off the pace. And he didn't play for Dublin again in the rest of the championship. So that being said, I do want to counteract that by saying that I think Rory O'Carroll has been fantastic in the club championship this season. And if I was Desi Farrell, I genuinely would be calling Rory O'Carroll back into the Dublin setup, but he'd be one of the first players that I'd have in to the Dublin setup with the experience that he has and with how good he looks right now. Whether he wants to come back, that's another question. But yeah, with Jack McCaffrey, it's one of those things that, yes, he is back, but Desi's going to have to manage these lads coming back. He's going to have to give them game time in the league, see if they're ready to come back to Dublin, because as you mentioned, Jack McCaffrey hasn't been playing much with Clontarf. So I feel like there will need to be communication there from Jack towards Desi. How do you feel? Do you feel ready for this game? I feel like give him a run out against some of the sides that maybe are towards the bottom half of Division 2. See how fit he is, see how ready to go he is. I think the Derry game in Division 2 will be crucial because I feel like that will be a good litmus test for McCaffrey, for Mannion, and then obviously the practice games as well that, get organised behind closed doors between county sides. That will be crucial to see where they're at this year. And look, ability-wise, they're absolutely starter level. But I think Desi's going to need to manage them very, very well this season to make sure that we get the absolute most out of them.
Yeah, I agree as well. I think that Derry game, I think it's towards the end of the league as well. I think the second last game or third last game, it could be a real sort of promotion battle game. I think it's in Derry as well, in Owenbeg potentially. So, I mean, it will be a big game for those lads to sort of get game time, considering when you look in the Leinster Championship, there's probably not going to be too much of a significant sort of challenge there until possibly the group stages or the later rounds of the All-Ireland. But like looking how Dublin sort of might line up with Jack McCaffrey coming back into the team, I mean, obviously in the past when McCaffrey's sort of been there, it's been like a half-back line of McCaffrey, John Small, James McCarthy, sometimes obviously in there as well. Obviously Owen Merchant would sometimes play in the half-back line, but do you think he gets pushed back to cornerback and you keep McCaffrey in that wing-back position? Or what do you think? Do you think there could be much sort of changes? Because obviously, as you said, it's a hard one to know because like 4 years have passed since McCaffrey played. So it'll be interesting to see if he still has that same energy, the same legs and everything else, or whether it's almost like you push him back a bit more to... I don't know. I'm kind of just spitballing here, but what do you think?
Yeah, I think it would be very interesting to see who comes in and who starts into the backs for Dublin, because on top of that, if you're Desi Farrell and you ignore that Kilmacud Crokes defence, you're mental. Because Crokes, literally, in two of the biggest games that they've had so far this season, they've held the other side scoreless from play in the first half. Port Darlington and the Downs. That's absolutely incredible. They've got the likes of Andrew McGowan, Killian O'Shea, Rory O'Carroll that have all looked fantastic. And if Desi doesn't at least give them a chance in the Dublin defence, I don't know what more they have to do. So, like, those lads surely will get a run out. Then you got McCaffrey coming back. You got James McCarthy still there. John Small. David Byrne obviously is still there. Lee Gannon, nominee for Young Footballer of the Year 2022. He's there. Is he going to go if Merchant drops back into the corner? Michael Fitzsimons, what's he like? Is he ready to go for another year? There's a lot of lads that could slot into that defence. Personally, if you were to ask me right now, I'd go with Comerford in goal. I'd go Lee Gannon right cornerback. I would go Rory O'Carroll fullback. I think he's been magnificent for Crokes. I would go Mick Fitzsimons left cornerback. I would go McCaffrey, James McCarthy, and probably John Small. Owen Merchant is right on the tip of my tongue, and Owen Merchant is someone that, look, I think if Owen Merchant came in for anyone in that defence, I think he'd do an excellent job, and particularly against us when the Fianna played us in the championship, he was bombing up and down the pitch, and he looked, $1 million. But that defense is solid. That back six is really, really solid. You could even argue maybe move McCarthy back into midfield if he still has the legs, and put John Small centre back and Merchant on the left. That definitely could also be a proposition. And then you've even got the unknowns. You've got the likes of Robbie McDade, who was excellent in 2020. You know, we haven't heard much from him since. Will he come back in? You know, Tom Lahiff with St. Jude's looks fantastic at right half back. Will he get a run out there? So that there's definitely some interesting ones. Even the likes of Dan O'Brien with Crokes is definitely worth a shout. I think he's brilliant there at wing back. So be interesting to see. But that so far would be my back six, with Merchant definitely playing a key role. For certain games, I would start on Merchant.
Yeah, it is healthy having those options anyway, because Merchant as well, funnily enough, has had a lot of injury problems in the last sort of year or two as well. So, you know, like at least if he's not available, you know, they can put a McCaffrey in there, or they can sort of make changes to bring players in. Like I think when Merchant has been fit and available, I think you see the difference with having someone like him in the team, like sort of getting up and down the pitch, sort of being that extra man in attack, but also having the pace to track back and defend as well. Like, and hopefully if McCaffrey can add what he used to add back in, you know, the 2010s and everything else, I think it would be crucial. Looking at how Paul Mannion might slot in, though, I mean, looking at the full forward line last year, like obviously a Dean Rock, Cormac Costello, Con O'Callaghan, obviously when he's fit, that would have been Dublin's sort of starting full forward line with Kieran Kilkenny in behind. But now that Paul Mannion's back in the frame, I mean, like, do you move one of them into the half forward line, or does one of them go to the bench? What do you think?
Well, Mannion's straight in. Like, make no mistake, Mannion is straight in. I'd say my front six would be Brian Howard, right half forward. I think he was really, really good last season. I think he got underrated with how well he was playing. Kieran Kilkenny would be my centre half forward. Niall Scully's an interesting one. Because he was such a key player under Jim Gavin. Like, he was one of those players where he was almost like a Sergio Busquets of Dublin, if you get what I mean. Like, where you're looking at the Spanish midfield and you're saying, like, you know, what is this guy doing? But then once you watch what he was doing, he was so important to that Dublin side. Is he as important to the Dublin side under Desi Farrell? I'm not quite so sure. And then obviously you've got, you know, talented players, the likes of Sean Bugler, the likes of Lorcan O'Dell, pushing for that starting position. I probably would go with Sean Bugler over Niall Scully right now. If you were to ask me, I think Bugler's, you know, fantastic potential even there. He's already reached a very, very high level. And then in the full forward line, I would go with Mannion, Con O'Callaghan and Cormac Costello. I just think Dean Rock wasn't playing at the level that we know he can reach last season. And I think off the bench, Dean Rock has been a magnificent impact sub off the bench for Dublin in big, big games over the years. I mean, the one that I remember most is the Leinster final against Meath in 2019, where Rock wasn't starting and he came off the bench and hit, like, I think it was 5 or 6 points from play, and he was like fantastic. And I do think, look, there's no one better in the game, I think, right now than coming off the shoulder at the right time and taking the shot than Dean Rock. Because you have to remember, Dean Rock isn't the quickest. Like, he's not a bullet. He's not a Jack McCaffrey. He's not a Paul Mannion. He's not a Cormac Costello. He's not lightning quick. His timing is fantastic. His timing is brilliant. He decides when to make that burst, get the hand pass and shoot. And I think he's one of the best in the business at doing that. So I think Dublin need that impact off the bench again. We need that ace in the pack that we can just bring on when the game is going against us. And Dean Rock has all that experience. I think Dean Rock on the bench with Paddy Small, with Lorcan O'Dell, I think that's a really, really strong Dublin bench, with Niall Scully too. I think those are all four forwards that can change the game. And yeah, so that would be my front six. But I'd be interested to hear what yours is.
Yeah, no, I'd probably agree as well. Like, I'd have Dean Rock probably on the bench as well. Like, I think he has slowed down quite a bit last year, like, especially from play. He probably doesn't contribute enough, is what I would say. He was fairly quiet, I felt, against Kerry in that game. Obviously, from place balls, he's exceptional and one of the best in the game. But I still think we've a lot of, you know, Paul Mannion's equally as good at times. We've seen him with Kilmacud with Crokes. Like, he's like a solid player from place balls as well. So I don't think we're missing too much without Dean Rock starting. But yeah, I think Kieran Kilkenny's a shoe-in in behind. Like, with Niall Scully, it's interesting as well, as you said, because he, for some reason, he didn't really feature much last year. Like, he wasn't a starter, which was strange. Like, I didn't really understand why, considering how crucial he was in 2020 and even in 2021. Like, I don't think he had a bad season. Like, I think it was probably just one of them things where you know, because Dublin lost, everyone starts pointing the finger. But like, I think if you get him back into the side, you know, like, and as you said, he's sort of the man who, you know, he plays the pass before the pass, if that makes sense. You know, like, and I think you get him back in the side, I think he'd be so crucial. And yeah, like maybe someone like a Sean Bugler, who's looked very, very good last couple of seasons. I mean, Brian Howard, you can't look past him, I suppose, as well. So I suppose the good thing is, like, we're discussing a lot of options here. I remember last year, and you were looking at the starting 15 plus the bench, and you were thinking, my God, I don't know who's going to come on and make a difference. Whereas now you've got a lot of options there to make to sort of, you know, make an impact in a game if they need it.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think that was one of the biggest fear factors of the Dublin team that of the 2010s was the Kevin McManamans that were coming off the bench. The lads that just made such a difference. I mean, I remember one game, it was even in the All-Ireland final in 2020, Dublin brought off the bench Paul Mannion and Brian Howard. I mean, talk about two lads who could make a difference to a game. Those two were outstanding in that final when they came on against Mayo, and they really helped to turn the game in Dublin's favour. One thing that I'd be interested in as well is who would we put forward as the midfield partner for Brian Fenton? Would we be sticking with Lahif, or has someone like a Peadar O'Cofaigh-Byrne, you know, have they come good enough? Like, I genuinely don't know. Who would you kind of put with Fenton?
Yeah, it's a difficult one. I mean, like, I think Peadar O'Cofaigh-Byrne, when he first burst onto the scene, I remember thinking, like, this is the guy definitely to partner Fenton, but for whatever reason, it didn't quite materialize. Like, he just wasn't quite starting enough, and I don't know if Desi really fancied him or something of that nature. Maybe one or two injury issues in there as well. Like, Tom Lahif has probably been the regular starter under Desi, and he's done really well, in fairness. Like, he's maybe not as flashy as like a Brian Fenton, or he won't maybe score, you know, points for play or anything like that, but he keeps things ticking and he keeps it simple. Adam Waddick is a player that I'd be interested to see maybe coming into Dublin. I mean, maybe he might be a year or two soon, potentially. But he's, like, in terms of size, he's huge. You know, like, I think physically he'd be well able to handle the fort in there. And I think coming into Division 2 as well, like, we've seen teams down the years, Galway, Mayo, Donegal, who've all sort of used Division 2 as like a springboard to bring through younger players, because there's not as much risk, you know, in terms of you probably still beat Limerick anyways, or probably beat Clare anyways. Obviously, you don't want to be too disrespectful to them sides, but I think all in all, you know, like, if the younger lads can't get the job done against them, then, you know, realistically, they're probably not good enough then, you know.
Yeah, and then on top of that, when we're talking about bringing through midfielders and giving them, you know, a test and seeing if they can handle it, it's one of those things where you have to remember the teams in Division 2 as well. Their midfield is actually exceptional. Like, some of the midfielders that are in Division 2 this year are outstanding. I mean, you've got Derry there with Conor Glass and Emmett Bradley. You've got Kildare there with Kevin Feely. You've got, you know, Clare's midfield there is really, really strong. The likes of Darren O'Neill, Cathal O'Connor. Like, the midfields in Division 2 are really, really strong. And even Meads, like, I've always really highly rated Brian Menton. I think he's a really good player. The midfields in Division 2 are good. And it's one of those things where you're looking at it and saying, if Adam Waddick is to come through, and if he is to start a couple of games in the league against Dublin, while yes, the forwards might be playing against a weaker defence, or the backs might be marking a weaker forward line than they would in Division 1, in midfield, not so much. You're going to be coming up against probably one of the best midfielders in the country in certain games. And it would be a great test for an Adam Waddick, for Peadar O'Cofaigh-Byrne. Even Shane Carty from Naomh Marnock is always someone that I've really highly rated. I think he deserves a shot, at least in there. Craig Diaz as well. I know maybe, you know, he's a bit on the older side, but I think he's looked brilliant for Kilmacud Crokes. And I remember, like, that goal that he scored against Naas was absolutely outstanding. I think he deserves another opportunity there for Dublin, in my opinion. Yeah, Lahif as well. Like, have a few games where you don't have Brian Fenton and see how they work out. See how, you know, who comes in for who, because Brian Fenton has been I don't think I can't really remember if I've watched a Dublin game, league or championship, in the last 5 years where Brian Fenton has not been playing. He's always been there. He's always been the number 8. So I think it's crucial in the league that we see, you know, give these lads a game without Fenton there holding their hand in midfield, and see who steps up to the plate, see who leads the way. Adam Waddick is a great shout, because with Thomas Davis, you have to think of, you know, that setup there. Thomas Davis are, you know, a real unit, and Adam Waddick, you know, coming through the under-20s there like he did. You think he played for the under-20s when he wasn't. He was still a minor. He was that good that they brought him up when he was an 02 playing with people that were born in 2000. Like, he's really, really good. So, yeah, I feel like he's a very, very good shout. Actually, yeah, if he shows up in the league and if he, puts his hand up, I'd actually be leaning either Waddick or Tom Lahiff for me.
Yeah, like I think it's important definitely for Desi to mix it up a bit in midfield, because I think, touch wood, you wouldn't want Brian Fenton obviously getting injured, but if he did, you're talking about all of a sudden quite an inexperienced midfield who aren't used to starting big championship games week in, week out. So it's definitely important for Desi to sort of mix it up. Any other younger players you could think of that might maybe sort of be in around the panel or maybe might make a breakthrough?
I like Ono D from the Fina. I think he was pretty good when he played against us, obviously in the championship. He marked Don O'Donnell, and he really showed a good ability to deal with a high ball dropping in on him. There's a few other Nafina lads there that have looked really, really good over the last few club championships. James Doran, I think, looks like a really, really good player. On top of that, Aaron Byrne, we've been waiting for him to nail down a starting position for Dublin over the last few years. That left half forward position, as we mentioned, we couldn't decide, Niall Scully or Sean Bugler or who gets it. This could be the year where Aaron Byrne gets it. I mean, he's been, knocking on the door for the last few seasons. He was the under-21 footballer of the year in the last year that the competition was under-21s and not under-20s. So I think Aaron Byrne definitely is one to watch out for in 2023. Obviously, Kieran Archer's one that was confusing. He looked like he was going to tear the world apart when he was in the under-20s. He put up outrageous tallies, and we haven't heard from him since. I mean, he came on against Kerry in the league, and played 10 minutes, and that's basically been it. I think it'd be interesting to see if he comes back into the senior fold, if he gets a game under his belt. There's a lot of lads that are playing in the competition that you mentioned, obviously, that Jack McCaffrey is in. If I had to put one player though that I think will break into the Dublin side, my nomination is Darren Mullen from Kilmacud Crokes. I think he's been really, really good for Kilmacud alongside Jane Walsh. I think he's quietly been racking up huge tallies, and obviously we mentioned Dean Rock is slowing down. Other players are slowing down until they're getting on the older side. There is that spot at left half forward free. You could see Conor O'Callaghan move out to the half forward line even. And if he does, I wouldn't be surprised if Darren Mullen gets given a shot in the full forward line there.
Yeah, it's a good shout. Conor McHugh of Nafina as well is another mention. I think although he's not necessarily a younger player, but he's been thereabouts, sort of in and around the panel the last couple of seasons. So definitely a lot of there's definitely a lot of options potentially for Desi to work with next year. But ultimately, I think we're both predicting Dublin to come through. Division 2 is sort of. Do you think we'll go up as champions, or do you think maybe we might just get over the line in the end?
I think we're going to win pretty much every game that we play in Division 2. I think anything else is a bit of a failure. I think the Derry game will be our trickiest one. Meath as well will be interesting. Obviously, they've got Colm O'Rourke in there as manager, and they've got a lot of the influence from the 1990s side, which is why I'm saying right now, if you want to see a GAA fight, tune into that Dublin versus Meath game, because those Meath players are going to be pumped up to all levels to have a go at Dublin. And yeah, that's my prediction for that one. But I think the Derry game will be the toughest. The Meath game would be the dirtiest that they play in the league, because obviously the rivalry there between the two counties. And yeah, I think we're going to win Division 2 as champions. I think we're going to win the Leinster Championship. And for the All-Ireland, I think it's between us and Kerry.
Yeah, no, it's one of them sort of, because I think the way it's fixed is that it will be, I think it's going to be Ulster versus Munster in the semi-finals, and then Leinster versus Connacht. Now, obviously, it might be a little bit different this year because of the group stages, and that might change things ever so slightly. If the provincial winners don't finish first in their respective groups, so it might potentially change things. But if all goes according to plan, you could have a Dublin Kerry All-Ireland final, which would be, 2019 was a very, very good final. Obviously, the first game, but it was a much younger Kerry side, and it was Dublin in their prime. Whereas now it's Kerry very much in their prime, Dublin sort of maybe slightly over the hill in some ways, but a lot of lads still very much in their prime as well. So we could be talking about one of the All-Ireland finals of the ages. If it happens, now it rarely does happen. There's always thrills, spills, shocks and everything else, and we certainly can't discount anyone else. But if that was the All-Ireland final, I mean, take my money now.
Yeah, no, proper. And the one caveat is we know that Mayo love a good semi-final against Dublin. They love a good semi-final against Dublin. Mayo are a lot more dangerous in the semi-finals. I think Galway as well. They're, top side. Roscommon be interesting to see where they're at. I don't think they're quite at Dublin's level, but it'll be interesting to see how they move with obviously the new management in there. Yeah, I think Dublin could get to that final. There's a route there for them, and they're more than good enough. I think you write this Dublin team off with your peril because recency bias is ridiculous. I mean, like 6 All-Ireland titles that this Dublin side has won. And I mean, I know that a lot of lads have left. Like a lot of lads have left that side. But if you actually look at the 2020 All-Ireland final and you look at the starting lineup, there's a lot of those lads still playing. There's a lot of that team still playing. And so that's why I'm saying that, look, I think we are very, very capable of winning that All-Ireland final, and very, very similar to yourself. If that is the All-Ireland final, like, take my money now. Like, I'll pay whatever to go to that game. That'll be an absolute cracker, because there's been a series of rivalry now that has developed up, not just between, the history of Dublin and Kerry, but between those two sides. Because even when Dublin were, kings of the country, Kerry were still able to give them a game no matter what. And you think it back to the 2020 league, that draw where Clifford kicked that monstrous free at the end to level it up. And then the scuffle afterwards, like, you remember that game was unbelievable. You remember in 2019, Kerry beat them in the league down in Tralee. Like, it was one of those things where Kerry were always able to give them a game no matter how good Dublin were. And especially now, Dublin upped their game for Kerry in the All-Ireland semi-final when a lot of people thought Kerry were going to run us over. So next year, I can't wait. Hopefully these two teams lock horns again, and hopefully it's in an All-Ireland final, and I can see us winning it. I really can. I can see Dublin winning the All-Ireland in 2023. If we play our cards right, if we, manage McCaffrey right, if we manage Paul Mannion right, if we get our best team on the pitch for the biggest games, I think we can get over the line. And the reason that I'm basing that off is we only lost by a point to Kerry in the semi-final last year, when we had 3 of the best footballers in the country that would walk into any team in the country, in Jack McCaffrey, Paul Mannion and Conor O'Callaghan, when they're all fit and at 100%. We had all 3 of them missing, and we went down by 1 point. Kerry had their full team. There's no one to come in for Kerry. There's no one that would have started that didn't. They had their best team on the pitch that day. They beat us by a point. Do Paul Mannion, Jack McCaffrey and Conor O'Callaghan make a 1.2 point difference to Dublin? Absolutely. So that's why I think we'll win it in 2023. I think clean sweep. I think we win it.
Yeah, and it's funny, like I forgot to mention earlier, one man that is coming back to Dublin as well that I forgot to mention is Pat Gilroy. We don't really know what sort of capacity or what way he is coming back. Like whether he's coming, like I think the rumour mill maybe is that he's coming in as some sort of defensive coach to help with Dublin defensively. Because when you look at Dublin actually back in sort of 2011, 2012, like I think a lot of people forget how good Dublin were defensively. Like I think they only conceded 111 to Kerry in that All-Ireland final in 2011. Or they conceded very little throughout the championship season, and Gilroy had very much sort of taken Dublin from being very open defensively. Even in Gilroy's first season, 2009, like when they got hammered by Kerry, like he made a lot of changes in 2010, 2011. But what do you think? Like, what kind of way could he be coming back into the Dublin side, or what kind of impact maybe could he have? Because it's certainly an interesting one. Like it's a hard one to know whether it will actually work or not. It'll be weird for him coming in maybe as like not as a manager, like considering how big of a profile name he is with Dublin GAA. But what do you think?
I think he's a brilliant addition to the team, because I think when Jim Gavin obviously came in and, went on to do what he did, Pat Gilroy was crucial in that. Pat Gilroy was the building blocks of that Dublin turnaround. You think the Dublin team in the 2000s was this rock and roll, team. It was either going terribly or it was going amazing. And you know, one little domino would fall and the whole thing would go. I mean, you remember how many All-Ireland semi-finals did that Dublin team lose? How many All-Ireland quarter-finals did that Dublin team lose? After dominating Leinster, Dublin would look like, you know, there'd be 82,000 people or something in Croke Park to watch Dublin in the Leinster final, and they'd make it really hard, but then they'd go and win, and they'd win with, you know, a flashy score, and the whole county would get really excited, and then they'd play a Mayo, or they'd play Tyrone, or they'd play Kerry or Cork, and they'd take them out. And that was the pattern that Dublin were on in the 2000s. They couldn't get over the line in an All-Ireland semi-final. They just couldn't do it. And Gilroy came in, and the first thing he did was make Dublin hard to beat. Because the other thing that I didn't mention when I said that is the 2008 quarterfinal against Tyrone. Tyrone mopped the floor with Dublin. The 2009 quarterfinal against Kerry. Kerry took Dublin apart limb from limb. The first thing Gilroy did was come in and make us hard to beat. Really, really hard to beat. Now, did that take time? Absolutely. You think back, you know, Meath put 5 goals past Dublin in the Leinster Championship in 2010. It took time for the players to buy in. But by 2011, Dublin were rock solid at the back. They were rock solid at the back. And that was the reason why Dublin were able to win that All-Ireland in 2011. I think player for player, Kerry probably had a better team on the day. But Dublin were able to just, you know, break them down, forced them into playing their way. They stayed in the game and hit Kerry late. And it was a brilliant, brilliant performance by Dublin on the day. The defence being so strong was the reason why Dublin were able to win the way that they did. I mean, you look at it, 2009, Kerry beat us 124-17, I believe the scoreline was. And then 2 years later, Dublin are beating that Kerry side in an All-Ireland final. It's an amazing turnaround. And Gilroy deserves all the credit in the world for it. So that's why I'm saying that, look, him coming back in, he will make that Dublin defence work harder. He will make that Dublin defence tighter. And I think if Gilroy comes back in, you could actually see Roy O'Carroll coming back in too, because Roy O'Carroll was Pat Gilroy's fullback. He was Pat Gilroy's number 3. And if he brings back in O'Carroll and Gilroy linking up again in the defence, you know, O'Carroll could be the leader on the pitch there for Dublin. That's an outside shot. It might not happen, but I think Gilroy coming back in is definitely a good thing, because I think he took a Dublin team that was so much hype and made them a seriously hard-working, dogged, determined team. And I think he can definitely do that again with this side.
100%. Now, it's going to be very interesting, all right, to keep an eye on the Dublin footballers next season. But we'll go through the Dublin hurlers. We'll discuss them before we obviously finish up. And obviously a bit of change with the Dublin hurlers. I mean, a few lads obviously coming out of the side, as we were sort of mentioning before we started. And obviously Micheál Donoghue coming in as manager, which is, I suppose, is the sort of big talking point. Obviously an All-Ireland winner with Galway. Another Galway man coming in as manager of the Dublin hurlers. So what were your sort of thoughts when he got appointed, and how do you think it might end up going in 2023?
Look, I thought it was an interesting appointment, because Donoghue didn't really look to me like he was going to come back to inter-county management. He didn't really give off that type of signal. It's not like when, you know, it's not like when Davy Fitz leaves Wexford and you know it's only a matter of time before he takes over another side. Like when Donoghue stepped away, I really thought he was gone. I really thought he wasn't going to come back. Then to come back as Dublin manager, I thought was really interesting. One manager that, if you had asked me at the time, I would have gone with Eddie Brennan. Genuinely, I would have gone with Eddie Brennan, because I really, really liked the way that Laois were looking under Eddie Brennan. I think they were showing signs of like a really, you know, ambitious, driven, motivated team. And Eddie Brennan was at the absolute heartbeat of that. And he was demanding a lot from the county board, and he wanted this, and he wanted things to be better, and he wanted the standards to improve. And there definitely was an imprint of what Brian Cody had at Kilkenny on what Eddie Brennan was trying to build with Laois. And I really liked it. And I was saying, I would love, and you have to remember, Laois beat Dublin with Eddie Brennan at the helm in 2019. And that was after Dublin had beaten Micheál Donoghue's Galway. So I think like Laois looked so good under Eddie Brennan. I was saying, if you give Eddie Brennan the resources that Dublin have, he would have everything that he wanted, which he's not getting at Laois. And he would have a better team, in my opinion, than the Laois one. I was like, I think that Eddie Brennan can take us to the next level. I really do, especially with Eddie Brennan. He would bring in, you know, the young lads that play for Crokes, the likes of Keano Kohosik, the likes of Brian Sheehy, the likes of Dara Purcell. He would bring these lads in, and it would be a complete overhaul of the Dublin team, which could potentially lead us to wherever we go here. You know what I mean? This team could go places. You know, we've won Leinster minor titles. We've won silverware in the under-20s. Like, we've won things. It's there. The pedigree is there. The players are there. And I was saying, I would have probably picked Eddie Brennan. Micheál Donoghue is still a good choice. Micheál Donoghue is a manager that has won an All-Ireland with Galway in 2017. That being said, he doesn't have a Joe Canning in this team. He doesn't have a Conor Whelan in this team. Dublin's weakness is our forward line. So I think that is going to be very, very interesting to see how he manages here, because there's a few lads, the likes of Ronan Hayes, that have been so hit or miss over the last few years, particularly not only with Dublin, but with Kilmacud Crokes as well. One day he looks like Seamus Callan in his pomp, and then the next day he doesn't score from play. It's like one of those things where he's a key player for Donoghue, and Donoghue has to get the best out of Ronan Hayes, I feel. But in an appointment, I'm happy with it, but I'm interested to see where it goes. I think he has more pedigree definitely than Matty Kenny does going into the job. I know Matty Kenny won 2 All-Ireland titles back-to-back with Coola in the club championship, but I think Donoghue, you know, the experience there of winning the All-Ireland with Galway, I think is invaluable. But I would have probably picked Eddie Brennan if I'm being 100% honest. But I am looking forward to seeing what Donoghue does. I think he's a very good choice.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, all right. Like, definitely Davy Fitz and Eddie Brennan probably would have been my 2 front runners. But when you're mentioning there, like, I mean, Brennan obviously in charge of Coola at the moment. I mean, he knows Dublin hurling very well now over the past 2 seasons, so he probably would have been a great appointment. But whether there was an approach there, I don't know. But I think, as far as I know, I think Eddie Brennan is living in Dublin anyway, so he might.
He managed Coola as well, though. Like, he managed Coola. Like, the building blocks were there for him to go into the job. I really thought him going to Coola when he did, I thought that was a tee up for the Dublin job eventually.
Yeah. Like, who knows? He might end up coming to Dublin at some point, but maybe he was possibly holding out for the Kilkenny job. You just don't really know what was sort of going on there. But yeah, no, like, as you were saying there, I mean, there is good hurlers coming through. Like, obviously they got to an under-20 All-Ireland final a couple of years ago. You see with Kilmacud Crokes, with Nafina, some of the quality hurlers that are on show in the club championship. So there is talent, there is players coming through there, and it has been sort of a weird limbo period for Dublin in the last couple of seasons, where we've got the odd good result here and there. Like, we've a good habit of beating Galway. I remember beating Wexford. Well. Yeah, beat Wexford last year away from home, and you're thinking that's a huge win for Dublin, and got to a Leinster final 2 years ago as well. So, like, there clearly is a lot of good players there. It just seems maybe consistency, maybe a bit of belief was lacking at times under Matty Kenny.
Can't beat Kilkenny.
Yeah, no.
Like, that's the first step for Donoghue, is if you get a game against Kilkenny, be it a challenge match, be it a game behind closed doors, we need to beat Kilkenny, and we need to get that feeling in that we can beat them, because Kilkenny have beaten us. When's the last? 2013 is the last time that we beat Kilkenny.
It might be, yeah. And the last time in the championship, anyway. I don't know if we beat them in the league, but I don't think so, to be honest.
Yeah, so I think 2013 when we did actually win Leinster, like that's 10 years ago now when this championship starts. Like, that's unbelievable how long ago that is. And so yeah, I think that's the first thing, is to get that belief into the side that we can beat Kilkenny. And I don't know why we don't have it, because when you look at that, we've beaten Wexford, and Wexford beat Kilkenny in Nolan Park when it all was on the line. Like, so why we don't turn up in these games against Kilkenny is beyond me. I think, look, we need to beat Kilkenny early on and get that belief into us that we can do it. And then that would definitely give it, a real shot in the arm for this Dublin side, a real turbo boost towards bigger and better things.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, because, I mean, I'm not necessarily even beating Kilkenny, but just being a lot more competitive with them, because when we play Galway, when we play Wexford, we mightn't always beat them, but we'll usually give them a good game and give them sort of a run for their money. I mean, I know Galway beat us fairly comprehensively in the end last year, but generally speaking, we do give those counties a game, you know, and even when we've played Cork or other sides down the years, we tend to kind of put up a bit of a fight, bit of a battle. I think we beat Tipperary in the league last year as well. And then with Kilkenny, you know, every now and again, we might put up a little bit of a fight. But then when you look at the full-time score, it's like Kilkenny have beaten us by 10 points, like, you know, like or more at a minimum. Like there's times when Dublin are playing Kilkenny and it's neck and neck after 50 minutes, and then Kilkenny just completely steamroll us in the final 15 minutes or so. So, like, just being a bit more competitive, I think, in that game. Like, even if they lost by a point or two and you sort of looked at and thought, right, there is progress here against these type of teams, you know. But I suppose we can't forget as well that Kilkenny probably are one of the best teams in the country, and, you know, Dublin aren't that, you know, let's be honest. So,
yeah, they'll be different next year, though. Obviously, Cody being gone. Like, yeah, I think Kilkenny next year are going to be a really interesting side. Will Derek Lynn completely switch it up? Like, because they're pretty much there. I mean, that was as good an All-Ireland final performance by a losing team as I've seen that Kilkenny put in last season. I mean, to score 226 in an All-Ireland final and to not win. I mean, they must be thinking, what more do you need to do? That shows just how good Limerick are. But yeah, Dublin aren't there in terms of the talent that we have. So we need to develop a system where we need to bring through young players who could go on to be that. And that was why I was more thinking of an Eddie Brennan as the manager, because I think that this is not a shot in the arm time, which is why I wouldn't have gone with Davy Fitz either, because I think Davy Fitz is a shot in the arm. I think Davy Fitz is perfect for the Waterford job right now, because Waterford have the players. They've brought through the players. They brought through the Desi Hutchinsons. They brought through the Michael Kileys. They've brought through the Ty de Burkes, the Jack Fagans, the Austin Gleesons. They've brought them through, and they're ready now. It's time to deliver now. It's time to win All Ireland. And when you look at Davy Fitz's record, he has delivered silverware when he's struck while the iron is hot, if you like. He delivered an All Ireland with Clare. He delivered a Leinster title with Wexford. And I think if they had got over the line against Tip in that semi-final in 2019, they would have been in a good position to beat Kilkenny in that final in 2019, because Tip won easy in that final. So Davy Fitz has a record of striking while the iron is hot, while you have the players. If you want to get an All-Ireland, Davy Fitz is a shot in the arm to go and do that. This Dublin team right now is a project. This is a project. This is going to take 5 years, I would say, to build up a Dublin team to be All-Ireland contenders. And Eddie Brennan looked like he was locked in to a project with Laois, and he looked like he was invested in a project in Laois to turn Laois into a serious All-Ireland team, to turn Laois into a side that competed for Leinster championships and so on. He looked like he was really invested in that, which is why I probably would have leaned to him as being, right, this guy is in it for the long term. He's in it for 4 or 5 years, and we can build something with this guy. You know, like a Pat Gilroy style in the hurling, or a Jim McGuinness style, where someone is, you know, taking these lads through from the under-20s into the senior side. It doesn't matter what the first year results are, the second year results are. The third year is where, you know, things start to come to the fore, and then have a crack at trying to win the All-Ireland. That's probably what I would have gone with if you had asked me this time last year. With Donoghue, how long is he going to be there for? I mean, it's 2 years that he's locked in for, isn't it? So does that tell me that Dublin are just going to try and have a quick dash at a Leinster title or something? Because we have a lot of brilliant young players. Sean Curry, Dara Purcell, Alex Considine, Brian Sheehy. These lads are fantastic hurlers. And if you're looking at me, you're saying, I'd be building the team around these guys, around the Sean Currys, the Donald Burkes, you know, the Micheál Murphys at Nafina, the Brian Sheehys, the Kilmichael Crowks. I'd be building a team around these guys, as well as, you know, the experience with Owen O'Donnell, the experience with Danny Sutcliffe, the experience, you know, there with Ronan Hayes. I'd be building around. I know Crumley won't be there next year, but he'd be back in my team the year after. You know, keep the lads that have been brilliant in the side. But we have seen that this Dublin side isn't quite there in terms of winning Leinster titles, quite there in terms of winning All-Ireland titles. So we need to bring through the young lads who maybe in 4 or 5 years can be. And I think that is why it's more of a long-term project. So with Donoghue coming in for 2 years, I just worry that, is this a long-term project, or is this just a smash at trying to win a Leinster title or something?
Yeah, I think maybe it could be a case of Dublin just trying to cover their tracks maybe a little bit just in case it doesn't work out.
Yeah.
Because obviously it's not, it is a bit of an unknown for Micheál Donoghue as well. Like, as we were saying there, you know, I don't know how much he knows about Dublin hurling circles. Obviously, he would have done his research. He's come up against Dublin numerous times, you know, through his time with Galway, and obviously been a pundit on the Sunday game the last couple of years. So I'm sure he's watched Dublin and studied them closely, and he seems like a very intelligent hurling man, make no mistake about that. But it could be a case of Dublin maybe looking at it and thinking, you know, it's not really, you know, as we were saying there, we don't really know how it's going to go. It could go really well. It could potentially back four, and maybe after a season he feels, you know, it's you know, maybe this just isn't for me. So I think maybe it could be a case of 2 years minimum. You see how the first year goes. If the first year goes really well, then maybe, you know, you extend it out and then sort of look more longer term. But I think the first year though is going to be crucial because, as you were saying there, like, I think it is going to be a rebuilding job. Like, there is going to be a lot of younger players that will have to come through the team because, you know, the likes of Danny Sutcliffe, although he's been one of the best hurlers to ever play for Dublin, in my opinion, I think, you know, the legs are going a little bit, in my opinion. And I think as the years go on, you know, like, these lads won't be able to play anymore, and you don't want to be left with a situation where you're throwing, you know, 7, 8 new players into a team at the start of a season, because then it's a completely bigger rebuilding job, and it's even tougher for whoever the manager is at the time. So that's why I think it is crucial. The likes of your Alex Considines, your Dara Purcells, these lads, like, they do start in these league games, because the league, you know, like, Dublin aren't going to get relegated. Let's be honest. I think don't think we'll, you know, we probably won't win it or anything like that, but it's important during the league anyway. Give these lads game time, because when else are you gonna really?
Yeah, well, like, that's the thing when you're talking about with a rebuild, the best way to do it is to bring in, to make the spine of the team the lads that have played together for years. So the lads that have come through the under-20s sides together, that have won Leinster titles together, bring them into the senior side together, and just, you know, this first year, just don't care about the results this year. Realistically, we could put our best team out there. We could have Chris Crummy. We could have, you know, Owen O'Donnell fully fit. Do I think we'd win All Ireland this year? No. We're not beating Limerick. We're not beating Limerick. We haven't played Limerick. Like, imagine what Limerick would have done to us last year. like, look how good they were. And one of those things where I'm like, right, we're not going to win All Ireland with the team that we've got now. That's not going to happen. So we need to rebuild. We need to. And it's best to do it now. It's best to bring these lads in and starting them when they have Danny Sutcliffe to feed off, when they have that experience that he has and that knowledge that he has to give them. That's what's best to do. Look at what Kilmacud Crokes did against Ballyhale Shamrocks. They should have beaten them. They should have beaten them. You know, the resources are there. The skills are there. We have the players. We have a very good spine for a future good team. We really, really do. And I was saying that, look, we've seen that this Dublin side can't win an All-Ireland this year, I think. So we need to rebuild them. And we need to keep the best players from the spine of the current Dublin team. You know, your Owen O'Donnells, your Donald Burks, your Conor Burks. We need to keep those lads in the side. But then we need to put the young talent around them. Eddie Gibbons, Brian Sheehy, Sean Curry, Micheál Murphy, Dara Purcell, Alex Considine. These lads need to be into the team now, because they are the future of Dublin hurling. And the fact that they have won, Andrew Dunphy as well from St. Bridget's is another one. These lads have won, you know, Leinster under-20 titles, Leinster minor titles. These lads are used to winning with Dublin. Get these lads into the team and say, look, first year results don't matter. We don't care. Give it your best shot. Get experience playing at inter-county level. Get experience playing the system that Donoghue wants to play. Doesn't matter if we don't beat Kilkenny. It wouldn't make it any different to the previous 5 seasons. Then go, right, second year we want to see improvement. Third year we want to see results. We want to see us, you know, taking out a big team. We want to see us making a Leinster final. We want to see us winning a Leinster championship. And in 5 years, I think if Dublin backed these lads, I think we could see an All-Ireland contender. I really do. I think they've got serious pedigree there. And I think if we all bought into a system, I think we could be a really, really, really good side.
100%. Yeah, no, like I think the potential is definitely there. Looking at it next year, though, I mean, in terms of the championship, like what is the realistic sort of expectation? Like we're definitely not going to finish below fourth in the Leinster round robin. I don't think we're going to get relegated. I know Antrim are a difficult team at the best of times, and we might possibly have to play them in Corrigan Park from what I've heard. But at the same time, you know, like we should be like minimum top four, and then obviously it's one of them things. Can they get out of the Leinster round robin? Like how far do you think Dublin can go in the championship next year?
What I'd be saying would be the aim for Dublin is a Leinster championship. If I'm being honest, I think Donoghue realistically will say, look, we have beaten Wexford before. As you said, we've beaten Galway in the past, in the last couple of seasons. And Kilkenny potentially might be in transition. Derek Ling there coming in as new manager. Brian Cody's gone. Will he try and put a new stamp on the side? If he tries to put a new stamp on the side, will that leave them a bit vulnerable? Will that, shake Kilkenny up a bit? So if I was Micheál Donoghue, I'd be trying to win a Leinster championship with this Dublin side. And the fact that he has a 2-year contract, I know that, maybe they're doing that, just in case that they can bail out if it doesn't work. But I'd be saying, yeah, Leinster championship is what he's going to go for. He's going to put together the best team that he can this year. And I think he's just going to go for a smash and try and win the Leinster championship in 2023. Do I think we can do it? Yes, I do. I think we can win a Leinster championship. I just don't think we can win an All-Ireland. I don't think we can beat Limerick. I don't think we can beat Clare really either. I think Clare are a bit ahead of us as well. But yeah, in terms of a Leinster championship, I think Kilkenny have more than a tendency to have an off day. And I know that, they looked amazing against Clare and they looked amazing against Limerick in the final, but they looked pretty poor against Wexford when Wexford beat them. They looked pretty poor against Westmeath for long stages. And they looked pretty poor when Galway beat them in the round robin. So Kilkenny do have a tendency to switch off in certain games. If Dublin can get them in those games, and say Kilkenny don't make it to the Leinster final and Dublin are playing a Wexford or a Galway, yeah, I think we could do it. But in terms of an All-Ireland, no. So I would say, look, realistically, I think Dublin this season, they will finish safe in the league, mid-table, and they'll finish mid-table in the Leinster Championship. Potentially third and make it into the All-Ireland quarter-final. But I think I'd be very surprised if we managed to make it into the All-Ireland semi-finals.
Yeah, like I think nearly the easiest route. I say easiest route. It's obviously not going to be easy in any way whatsoever. But if you were to look at the routes of getting to an All-Ireland semi-final, it probably actually is winning the Leinster Championship, because I think all the teams in Munster, to be honest, like obviously you don't have Kerry in there, but like the 5 teams that are in the Munster round robin, I think they'd all probably be favourites against Dublin. Like even Tipperary now with Liam Cahill, I couldn't see us beating them. I think Waterford, just no, I still think they're too good. Limerick, Clare, Cork as well. I think Cork are probably going to be dark horses potentially this year as well. Like so, like I couldn't see us beating any of them. To be honest, so I think it's coming through Leinster. Like if they could win the Leinster Championship, it'd be great. It's probably the only way realistically we'd get to an All-Ireland semi-final.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think that, look, Kilkenny, have had a tendency, as I said, to drop the ball in the Leinster round robin. So if Dublin can smash the Leinster round robin and maybe beat Kilkenny, maybe beat them, and we could get into a Leinster final where we're not playing against Kilkenny, I think we could win it. And then we could get into the last 4. I think that's the best route for Donoghue to go. I think that's what we're going to try to do. Realistically, I'll predict that Dublin will finish 3rd or 4th in the Leinster Championship. I think if we finish 3rd, I think we're going out in the All-Ireland quarter-final. And then I think we're going to finish mid-table in the league. That's my honest prediction. My hopeful prediction is a Leinster Championship.
Yeah, no, I think.
But I would be stunned if we do.
Yeah, no, like I'd agree with you there, like spot on, because yeah, like I think to say we'd finish above Galway, Kilkenny, like I think Galway are probably even going to be better this year as well. I actually think they're probably going to be the best team in Leinster this year. So to finish in front of them and Kilkenny, I just think it would be wishful thinking. Looking at the overall big picture of the All-Ireland, I mean, Limerick are unstoppable, and I think everyone I've spoke to doing these season previews hasn't betted against Limerick. So I mean, you're not going to either, surely.
No chance. No chance. Kilkenny, look how good Kilkenny had to be and they still didn't beat them. Look how good Clare were in the Munster final. Tony Kelly put in as good a performance as I've ever seen any hurler put in ever. And Shane O'Donnell played the best game I've ever seen him play. John Conlon played the best game I've ever seen him play. And they drew. Didn't even beat them. Like, you just see how good this Limerick team is. Like, nobody's beaten them, really, apart from Kilkenny, since in 2019. But since 2020, no one has laid a finger on them apart from Clare. So, like, it's going to take a miracle to beat this Limerick side in 2023. It really will. I think it's going to take an amazing performance from an amazing team. I think Waterford actually do have the players to do it. I think Waterford have the players to beat them. I think if they manage to bulk up around the midfield, I think they do have the players to put in a shock there. But my God, they're going to have to be good.
Yeah, no, it's like I think you'd be a madman betting against them or going against them. Like, I actually think it's possibly going to be fairly easy for them this year. I think this year actually might be their handy All Ireland. Although there's probably no such thing as a handy All Ireland, and I think in hurling there's so many competitive teams. But I just have a feeling this year that it's going to be very comfortable for them. Like, I think when you look at a lot of the teams that are in transition, teams that have new managers coming in, you know, I think Clare and Galway could really be close. You certainly wouldn't go against Kilkenny even with a new manager. Be interested to see what Tip are like under Liam Cahill, but it's just, you know, Limerick are just too strong.
Yeah, I think, look, Galway, there was a moment when Kincannon hit the back of the net for Galway where it was like, whoa, okay, they're right in this now. But still, the fact is, Limerick still won, though. Yeah. Limerick still won. Could Galway have been better? Yeah. For stages of the game, Galway could have been better. And maybe even if they have Joe Canning to bring him off the bench in the last 10 minutes, like maybe they could do something. But no, Limerick, you'd be a madman to go against Limerick. They've looked so good for the last few seasons. And their All-Ireland final performance against Cork in 2021 was probably the best All-Ireland final performance I've seen. You know, like Kilkenny, Waterford in 2008, yeah. But Limerick were so good in that final. And yeah, like I don't see anyone stopping them in 2023, to be honest.
Yeah, 100%. Well, look, cheers anyone who tuned in. Obviously, this isn't live, so anyone who has tuned in afterwards, I appreciate it. Leave a like, subscribe. Make sure to check out Play on GAA as well. I'm sure Seamus will have plenty of content going out there over the next week, so I'll be going on his show just after this actually to record an end of year special to look back at all the moments from 2022. So make sure to check that out when you get a chance. Cheers, Seamus, for coming on.
No worries, Aaron. Thanks for having me on again.